Well, well, well. We finally get to the point where I need to ask, what if the problems you struggle with today are sort of echoes of conversations your mind never finished years ago?
I think what I'm about to say is oh, go ahead, go ahead. You continue. I'll come in later.
What do you want me to tell you? I don't know. I'm unsure of this. Are there any conversations in my mind that I haven't finished?
Okay, good. Yeah, exactly. I think in many ways that kind of Freud's question, right? He first asks kind of what's going on, let's understand, and then he says, let's confront your troubles.
And make conscious the unconscious.
Exactly that. Hi, I'm Josh.
And this is Santi. Welcome to this session in the Mind Quest.
So today the idea was to talk a little bit about psychoanalysis. Partly because it is what informs part of the practice here at the Guild. But also because in many ways it's what organizes my own professional practice. And psychoanalysis is in many ways complex, but it also has these or rather, it invites these love-hate relationships. So you either love psychoanalysis and have a shrine to Freud, or you hate psychoanalysis and think it is all bullshit and nobody wants to fuck their mom, so obviously it's a lie. And I think this applies a lot to it has applied a lot to my own experience with psychoanalysis as well. Definitely throughout university, there were moments where I was like, yes, I'm gonna be a analyst, this is what I want to do. There were moments where I said, no, this is fucking bullshit, I'm in a cult, I should have chosen a different career. And this definitely was there in my master's degree as well, where there were days where it was like, oh my gosh, psychoanalysis, this is the key, the best in the West. Next day, fuck me, this is a cult, I need to get out, these people are fucking insane. And I think that is kind of what characterizes psychoanalysis. That it is complex, that it is difficult to understand, and that everybody kind of understands it in their own way, in whatever way they prefer to understand it. So this is why the question sort of today's topic came about. Like, is psychoanalysis actually useful? Does it make sense to talk about psychoanalysis in the 21st century? And, and if so, why? And if not, why not? And yeah, I think in many ways that's a question I'm asking myself as well. So, where I have my exploration of psychoanalysis today from very, very different perspectives. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got this idea. This is more or less like navigating the idea of God or religion. So depending on where you end up sitting down, you get different idea. But it all begins with our good friend Sigmund, and the idea that human behavior is also driven by unconscious process. Later, a number of thinkers expanded the idea towards internal conflict and relational experience. And well, we'll begin the main section with general definitions, I guess. Because I get a little bit of an idea now, but I know there's a lot more to know about it and deeper understandings of whatever really it's behind psychoanalysis, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely. I think there are not only differences over time, Freud himself throughout his lifetime will review and revise and discard his own theories from his earlier years. So from the beginning, there is this constant back and forth of what is actually what we're talking about. And definitely his disciples and his friends, they each kind of take psychoanalysis in their own way, in their own path, in what they are seeing. So let's begin with psychoanalysis, and like kind of what is psychoanalysis? So psychoanalysis is, I would describe it as a practice in mental health that is fundamented by the things that Freud sort of proposes or discovers, depending on who you ask. And it centers in the idea that the way to have a more permanent, more long-term improvement in your mental health is to understand what's under the things that are bothering you rather than just trying to fix those things. So if I want to stop smoking, Freud would say the way to actually stop smoking is to understand why I am smoking in the first place. To understand those unconscious mechanisms that are leading me to get out of my house and buy a pack of cigarettes. And that is actually what's going to make the change. That is actually what's going to let me say, oh, okay, now that I understand, I can stop. Or maybe I don't want to stop. That's the point. Maybe I want to continue smoking and I understand why I'm doing it. So Freud, like I said, is building this theory at a time where the other side of psychology is also kind of appearing, which is the more mainstream in North America, at least, when you think of cognitive behavioral therapy, when you think about behavioral intervention. That is kind of the other side of it, where it doesn't matter what's actually going in your conscious or in your mind. What we're trying to do is fix your behavior. So if you want to stop smoking, we're trying to stop the behavior of smoking, not trying to understand it, not trying to do anything beyond just you do not buy any more cigarettes. And we look at kind of the different critiques that are around psychoanalysis. But this is the basic outline. Psychoanalysis is a mental health practice developed by Freud originally, where the focus is on understanding the unconscious mechanisms that lead you to do the things that you don't want to do or that you want to change.
Okay, so I think it will be also important to explain how this whole stuff actually works. Like, what are the most common techniques? No, there must be some sort of art behind it, right? And I mean, what's the objective at the end? What is the goal? What are we aiming for in this whole process? It is just like reducing the symptoms, as happens most of the time in medicine, or we're aiming for something more.
Mhm. Yes, I would say no. Like if for medicine and for psychology, the goal is to diminish the symptoms. For psychoanalysis, like I said before, the goal is to understand the symptoms. And I believe that then the client can choose if they want to stop the symptoms, if they want to make a change, if this is actually the way they want to continue. So it sounds like a semantic difference, and I'm just using words in a different way. But there is like fundamental, like different alignment here. Versus my concern being you not buying any more cigarettes, and my concern being understanding why you keep going out of your house to buy cigarettes, even when you say at least that you don't want to. So one is more like solving a mystery, the other one is more like building something or deconstructing something in many literal ways, right? In a behavioral intervention, you are literally deconstructing the behavior, you are literally like trying to build new habits, and so on and so forth. Psychoanalysis doesn't do that. Psychoanalysis doesn't concern itself with what you do. It concerns itself with what you can say about what you do. So if you are still smoking, okay, let's try to explain why. Oh, I don't know why. Okay, say whatever comes to your head. And that is where psychoanalysis' famous sort of instruction comes from. Say whatever comes to your mind. Because yeah, if you already knew why you're smoking, you would just stop if that's what you want to do. You wouldn't be here in my office. So it makes sense that you are not going to immediately be able to say it. So say whatever comes to your head. And the idea is that as you say more and more things, we can start sort of picking things apart. Right? So we can start sort of finding things like, oh, I just realized, whenever you talk about going out to buy cigarettes, you always mention that something actually happened beforehand. Have you noticed that? Oh yeah, every time I do that. Oh no, that doesn't happen, but you know what? It does happen that I don't know, it happens more often if I don't know, if my mom's house. Oh, okay, so let's talk about that. What does that have to do with anything? Oh, you know what? And then we continue the story. And then we are putting together this puzzle. We are trying to figure out the mystery, right? Like, why are you doing this? That's the big difference between psychoanalysis and psychology. Psychology would say, okay, yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay, you want to stop smoking? Okay, let's put a goal. This week, instead of 2 packs, you're going to smoke only 1 pack of cigarettes. That's the goal. Boom, let's try and see what happens. So different paths. The idea or the reason why one would choose psychoanalysis, or why psychoanalysts would say you should choose psychoanalysis, is that we've talked about this before. Motivation, right? Okay, sure, my psychologist told me to smoke only 1 pack of cigarettes a week. Oh, I did it, good job! What happens when your psychologist is not there to tell you to only smoke 1 pack a week? What happens when you get anxious and you start smoking more? Because that is the problem. Not smoking. Like, do you see kind of what I'm getting to here? So what Freud would say is that the symptom, rather than being actually like dealt with, will be displayed. So okay, instead of smoking 2 packs of cigarettes, I'm smoking 1, but maybe I'm eating more instead of smoking. So whenever I would go out to smoke something, now I'm going down to the kitchen and having a snack. Did you actually solve the problem? You're not smoking, or you're smoking less, but the symptom is still there. And it will be problematic in the future when you realize, oh shit, I gained 40 kilos, maybe I should have continued smoking. I don't know. That's the point. That's why the client has to know that choice. That's why the goal is to let the client figure it out. And then they can decide. Maybe, yeah, you know what I realized, if I stop smoking, I eat more. So I want to continue smoking, or they like to figure out something else. Sure. That's what you want to do, sure. Again, different, right? Psychology will say, no, like that's harmful for you. You do something about smoking. Psychology will say, okay, let's see what's going on then. If that's not the problem, what is the problem? And then we can continue, figure out the real thing. So that's kind of the deal with psychology. Now that's kind of how it's different, right? It assumes there is an unconscious, and it assumes that the things you don't like about yourself you're trying to change have a grounding in that unconscious. And to figure it out, we need to talk. About what? About whatever. That's the point.
Okay. And I think one final step we need to take on this journey today is maybe finding an answer to the question, does it really work? Or what does the research says? I mean, there's a lot of papers out there about this and gives information, but most of the time it seems like unclear. It's not like the results of a chemistry test or I don't know, physics experimentation. It's uncertain. So, well, where are we standing on this field?
Right. So yeah, you are correct. Psychology and psychoanalysis, I'd say, are challenging to sort of quantize, because how do you quantize how happy somebody is? How do you quantize how anxious you are? And there are ways, but think of the question first. How do you quantize whether somebody has purpose in their life or not? So because the options of psychology are like that, are like abstract, what psychology will do is focus on the thing that it can observe, so behavior, right? So I cannot actually quantize how sad you are, because that scale will be relative to you, to me, to every other person. But maybe we can quantize things like, in the last week, how many times did you cry, right? Behavior. In the last week, how many times did you feel you were going to have a panic attack? Behavior, right? Things we can observe. So following that logic, what you can observe when it comes to therapy or medication is sort of outcome, right? Is, okay, I made a test on depression with you today, and you ranked, let's say, 7 out of 10 in depression. So let's have psychotherapy for 3 months. Let's apply ideally a different, because if you say it doesn't work, another test that measures depression, and let's see how much you get. If whatever you did in these 3 months worked, your line should look like this. If not, it should look the same or up. So that's why I say when I say, and you may hear this in the environment of psychology, measuring outcome. It means this, measuring what has changed in X amount of time. So when you do that, when you measure outcomes, it turns out that most psychological intervention, and right now I'm thinking specifically about psychodynamic psychotherapy, so that would be psychotherapy based on psychoanalysis, cognitive behavioral therapy, and things like, I don't know, like humanistic therapy or like client-centered therapy, like the more humanistic kind of school of thought, they all seem to have roughly the same effectiveness. None of them seems to be particularly more effective than the other. In fact, medication seems to have around the same effect as psychotherapy. The only thing that seems to be more effective is a combination. So the sort of ideal dream treatment is medication and psychotherapy. They go hand in hand. That combination does seem to have a higher level of therapeutic effect or of positive outcome than either by itself. But in terms of just outcomes, they seem to be around the same. There is probably a little bit of bias, right? If I think of psychoanalysis for the focus of the studies, they will say what I said earlier, right? That not only they present similar outcomes, but the outcomes of psychoanalysis seem to endure over time more often than the outcomes of behavioral cognitive therapy. Again, important to keep biases in mind, right? If I went to a psychoanalysis-based university, I did a master's in psychoanalysis, so obviously a lot of the papers I read were, psychoanalysis, that's from the West. But at the same time, I do genuinely believe that psychoanalysis has better outcomes than other forms of therapy, and that's why I practice it. But I think it's fair to say that at least they are on the same level.
Okay, so let's put this session to work. Okay. Two starting angles for me in this part, and according to the research, there's this clinical treatment approach and the framework work for understanding personality, like motivations and psychological distress. But I think the first thing we need to do is clarify what psychoanalysis actually is. I mean, the word is out there. Most of us think we have an idea of it, but and maybe pop culture has given us a lot of feedback that might be wrong. I got this feeling that is actually terribly wrong. So, what it is, it is still like it was in the 19th century or early 20th century, or it is there already a more modern version of it, or we're still blaming our mothers for everything, like we're teaching to.
So that is a surprisingly complicated question, because I think the answer will change depending on who you ask. Like I said earlier at the beginning, especially here in North America, there is definitely a perspective that psychoanalysis is kind of, well, was before psychology, or that it was sort of the precedent for psychology. And they usually think in that line. But obviously that's not the case in Europe or in Latin America. In Europe or Latin America, psychology is seen as just another form of another branch of psychology, the same way CBT is another branch. So, like a lot of things in psychoanalysis, the answer to the question, is psychoanalysis still the same as it was in first time, is yes, kind of. Yes, but no. So, you are correct in saying that most people are probably familiar with something about psychoanalysis. And the reason is that psychoanalysis is what really gave the picture of what psychology looks like. And that's because psychoanalysis came up with a lot of the fundamental sort of techniques and postures and understandings that have come to form the base of like psychology in general, not just psychoanalysis, but psychology in general. So things like CBT have little bit that came from psychoanalysis. So in that sense, yes, like we still use psychoanalysis as it has been incorporated into all of the other branches of psychology. However, I think the way Freud understood things at his time, that has changed. So I don't think anybody in 2026, any analyst would say, like, yeah, like what Freud discovered is that you want to fuck your mom. But I don't think anybody would really see that as a literal interpretation in 2026 or say it like that anymore. The thing is that what Freud was saying, that idea has remained. The thing is that, remember, we've talked about this before, right? Psychology is a really new science, right? Like medicine, math, geometry, they existed back in ancient Greece, thousands of years ago. Psychology did not. Psychology did not exist as a science until around like 120 years ago. So Freud is at the birth of psychology. That's why Freud is considered the father of psychology. Because he is the one that's trying to say, okay, wait, maybe these crazy people are not that different from the people that are just outside in the streets, like with everybody else. So Freud is trying to describe processes that are universal to all human beings, but he doesn't have the words to describe these processes. So he is discovering something that he cannot put into words. He doesn't know how to describe what he is discovering. So he does the only thing he can think of and says, this has to be with sex. But it's not because sex itself is the key. The key is the purpose of life. So that's his logic. His logic is, I have discovered something that pushes life forward, that makes people do things, that makes us as humans want to do things. So Freud is thinking, okay, so what is the thing that pushes life to do things? To reproduce. Sexuality. That is what it has to be. At the same time, the way he discovers the unconscious is because he's talking to these patients who are women in 19th century Vienna. So they are very much sort of repressed by society. So sexuality at the time is kind of the opposite pole. It is something that you are not supposed to talk about. That it is corrupt. If you see an uncle, that's like scandalous. So this is why sex is so important for Freud. Because he discovers the unconscious through these women who have a tremendously repressed sexuality, and that is causing the problem. And then he doesn't know how to express this basic function of life that he has discovered, so he just names it as sexuality. So, like I said, so I don't think a lot of people would still use sort of the Freudian explanation for the unconscious. But it is the same dynamic that we are describing when we use our modern words. The idea that there are patterns in your brain that push you towards doing certain things and towards not doing another. And these patterns in your brain are formed during the first years of your life. And they are very difficult to change later in life. So notice how that was a completely operational psychology 2026 explanation. But I just described the unconscious. So that's kind of the thing. What Freud discovered is still valid. We still use it. It is still incorporated into psychology. But we do not talk about it like the way Freud did anymore. Because we have now better words to describe what Freud was describing in his time. But that's why we still read Freud. Because the dynamics are still the same. So if you read Freud and you look at his cases and you understand his argument, you understand the dynamic that he's trying to show you. And then you can just match that to our modern language. So, okay, so this is dependency. Okay, this is depression. Okay, this is not depression, this is grief. Okay, cool. So that's kind of the idea. Freud, nobody goes to the office with Freud in hand. But we go to the office with people who are building on what Freud discovered. So in a way, yes, we do go to the office with Freud in hand. Just not with him alone. We understand that there is more now to what he discovered.
Nice. It's a little bit like these things with dinosaurs. People saying dinosaurs didn't exist in the past, so they are made up. But dragons did. So at some point, they are the same thing, right?
Right.
So, you need to find it. And there's a new word now to describe dragons. It's dinosaur. So
exactly.
More or less, I believe it's that's the frame inside it.
Exactly. Those were the words that there were at the time. So that was the only thing he could say. But now we have more words, so we can say it differently in a way that's more accurate.
Good. Now I want to give you a list.
Okay.
I understand they are called constructs, which kind of remind me of cyberpunk. What are they and what are they used for is the question behind. So we got this unconscious mind
Okay. So
or
let's go one
defense
by one.
mechanism.
Let's go one by one.
You want me to go one by one? Okay.
Yeah, because I should
unconscious
have
mind.
each of those is a different. Okay. But let's start with what's a construct, right? So Freud, like I said before, because he's trying to understand something invisible, he organizes. So he will say there are constructs in your mind. There are mechanisms that they seem to be somewhat common to most people. And that's kind of the word that sort of comes up. Like again, he's trying to describe something that doesn't exist. I mean, it exists technically somewhere inside your brain, but your brain is just neurons. So he's talking about something that is abstract, right? So he will say there are constructs in your brain. There are these mechanisms of your mind that your mind uses to function, right? And the first one was? Sorry, what did you say?
Unconscious mind.
Okay, the unconscious mind. So this is the first one he discovers. And this is why he sort of decided to pursue psychoanalysis as something, as a field of study. He realizes that not all the choices we make are product of our logical, rational mind making calculated decisions for our own good. Freud realizes that most of the decisions we do just kind of happen. We just do them in the spur of the moment. And he's trying to understand if we are not thinking about this rationally, right? If whenever I go to a restaurant and I order something, I am not rationally stopping to think, okay, how do I feel right now? Okay, I feel really, really hungry, so let me order something large. Do I want something sweet? No, I want something salty. Okay, I am not doing that process. So Freud is saying, if we're not doing that, so why do you choose a salad instead of a hamburger? Why do you like chocolate, but you don't like gummy bears? Why is there this texture to human experience? Why aren't we all choose the same and we live the same experience? So Freud is trying to understand why. So if I ask you, why do you like this person? It's very difficult for you to give an explanation. And your explanation is probably going to be very functional. Oh, they are nice to me. Okay. Why do you like them? Oh, they, I don't know. They are cool. Okay, what does that mean? I don't know. I just think they are cool. I just like spending time with them. Okay, why? Those are Freud's questions. Okay, good. I can see your behavior. But why are you doing that? Why is that the behavior? So notice again how this is the opposite of psychology, like observational psychology at the time, experimental psychology. They are saying, no, I don't care. I want to see what I can see. That's what I can measure. Freud is saying the exact opposite. I don't care what you can see. I care why. Why are you doing that? If you decide to get divorced, why did you choose? Oh, because of the kids. Okay, but why the kids? Because I care about the kids. Okay, sure, but why do you care? So Freud is trying to understand what's really below everything, right? So what's really driving all of these decisions? What's really giving you the personality that you have? What's making so that, if people know that I like gummy bears, they can predict that I will be happy if you give me gummy bears. Like, what brings in that consistency in your personality? Why don't you just choose at random every time? Why don't you choose logically every time? Why? So what Freud realizes is that there is something else. That whenever we go to a restaurant and we say, I don't like chocolate, so give me a carrot cake, what's coming into play is not us, the speaker, the thing that speaks, that gives reason and explanations, but something else, something unconscious, something that we cannot always sort of put into words. So that's why do you like chocolate? I don't know. I just like chocolate. I just like the flavor. The reason why I like the flavor, that's in the unconscious. And that's kind of what Freud begins to sort of tear apart. I think we have more. Okay, yeah. So that's the unconscious. Yeah. So the unconscious is that. If the part of you that makes you do things, but you don't know why. Because it doesn't go through your language. It doesn't go through you, the speaker.
Okay, so let's check on defense mechanism.
Okay. So the reason the conscience exists is to protect you. Because when you're a baby, for example, imagine how despairing it must be to be a baby and not be able to feed yourself. Imagine how sort of powerless you must feel as a baby when you have any biological need and you are completely unable to fulfill it. You depend completely on other person. So Freud would say that in order to sort of bear with those moments of anxiety or like powerlessness or like being human, those experiences get locked away. So you don't remember right now what it was like to be a baby, being hungry for hours and not being fed. That is locked away somewhere in your brain. But that's how the unconscious sort of begins its existence, as this functional vault to put the things that are unmanageable to you as a baby or as a kid, so that you can continue to have a somewhat happy, coherent experience of your life. But sometimes, as you grow older and more stuff gets put in there, sometimes things will slip out. Sometimes things will be threatening, will like unmanageable for the person. So this is where these defense mechanisms sort of come into play. This is something that Freud himself describes only one. It will be his daughter, Anna Freud, who sort of really put forward the idea of defense mechanisms. So what I would say is that in order for us to continue to be relatively stable, happy people, there are things that we just have to sort of, they cannot get to us, the speaker, and we just have to defend against them. They just have to be put somewhere else. So you may have heard of this one, for example, projection. Especially, I think, in our modern political discourse, it is very typical to hear about projection. Oh, they are the ones that are cheating the elections. Oh, but they are projecting. So they think, oh, we are robbing the election. They are the ones that are selling the country to the oligarchs. But they say, oh, we are the ones that are selling the country to the oligarchs. They are projecting. And this is not what projection means. This is not how Freud or his other sort of preferred projection. Projection is a very specific mechanism where something in you that you dislike, that you hate so much that you cannot admit in you, you see it in somebody else and hate it in somebody else. So projection is the explanation to why sometimes we encounter people that we absolutely hate and we cannot explain why. Sometimes the explanation is that that person has a quality that we hate in ourselves. But so that we do not have to deal with that, our unconscious introduces a defense mechanism and projects it to the other person. So it's easier for me to hate that person than it would be for me to hate myself. That would be horrible, like depression. Give me meds. But hating the other person, that's fine. I can help somebody. One more person. Una mancha más. Graffiti. For one more person, I can help. Easier to help. So that's kind of why defense mechanisms exist. Because they are there to protect you from things that would be unmanageable. That would be sort of a torment to live with. So there are a lot, but like I said, projection, one of the most common. And I think it's a good example of how it comes into play.
Okay, so I got these two. I think they are related because it's transference and counter-transference.
Yeah. So, again, these are the other two sort of key psychoanalysis concepts that you will also probably hear in the concept of psychotherapy as well. These have been sort of incorporated into formal psychology as part of how therapy works. Transference are the feelings that the client puts on the analyst, and counter-transference are the feelings that the analyst puts on the client. But remember something that I have said before about this relationship. The client doesn't really know the analyst or the psychologist. The client doesn't really know who they are outside the hour of conversation that they are having once a week or twice a week or whatever. So whatever feelings are being moved in the consulting space are a transference of somebody else's. So for example, maybe I am talking about my father and how much I hate my father. And then next session, I come and I am incredibly angry at my analyst. I am irrationally angry at them. I think they are failure, the worst analyst ever, and I want to leave. And I'm going to cancel I'm not, this is my last time. Sort of the analyst in that situation would say, well, why? What happened? So tell me more about this. You hate me? Cool. Tell me why you hate me. What is this hate like? And again, kind of in the idea situation, eventually you'll be like, oh, you know what? This feels like what I feel for my family. And how I hate him so much. Oh, that's. Oh, yeah. I'm angry. I'm angry because you said something that he says to me every time. That's why I'm fine with it. Oh, something changed. We discovered something new. So you are bothered with somebody talks to you like this because this reminds me of my father. Is this correct? Yeah. Oh, shit. You're right. That's why I hate my boss so much. Because he does this every time too. Oh. Yeah. Okay, so again, it's like we are discovering something. It's like we're trying to put together the puzzle. Right? So transfer and contrasfer are pieces of the puzzle. So the emotions that the client brings into the session and projects into the therapist, that is a key to understanding what's going on. Why do you actually get mad when somebody says this? And the opposite is also true. So if I, as the analyst, right, every time this person comes into my office, holy shit, this is so boring. I am like falling asleep. I do not even take notes because I'm zoning out thinking about like some video because I hate being here. That feeling. I also don't know this person. I also don't know who they are. I also don't, like, I have no relationship with them. They're a client. So where are these feelings come? Why am I so bored with this person in particular and not the other 5 I see on the same day? Why am I so bored with this person in particular? If the topic we're talking about is kind of fun, I would normally be interested in that. Like, why do I fall asleep when they talk? Oh, I am projecting something here. I am transferring something into this person. Why am I getting bored? So that's the key here. Maybe they are making everybody they talk to bored. And that's really important, right? Maybe that's their problem. Maybe that's why they don't have a boyfriend, a girlfriend, whatever, because they make everybody bored. Oh, okay, so it's important for me to bring this into the room. It is a key to understand. So that's called transfer and contrast. Are the feelings in the office.
We got 2 more in this list. So it's internal conflict and developmental fixation.
Okay. So they are somewhat related. Let's start with the developmental. Sorry, the developmental fixation. So for Freud, there are these stages that we go through as we grow older to go from the newborn infant that doesn't speak into the subject that is part of society and that understands language and that can exist with other humans. For Freud, like sort of progressing to these stages is not like a clean process. It's not that you either succeed or fail. But rather, there's always that is imperfect about this process. So there's always something that doesn't go perfectly in growing up. Like that's the logic here. Like nobody has a perfect childhood. So sometimes when that development not only like goes a little wrong, but actually gets out of track, is completely stopped or completely derailed by something. Trauma, violence, abuse, moving from one country to another, looking like at your caretaker, for example, your paradise or whatever. Like something happens, right? And the process that would normally happen does not happen in a good enough way, right? Like you hear a lot of this idea of good enough in psychoanalysis. It's not about perfection, it's about good enough. So when there isn't a good enough childhood for this person, there isn't a good enough progress to these stages, they may end up stuck, fixated in one of these stages. So you may have, for example, heard of the expression oral fixation or anal fixation. They refer to this being stuck in one of these stages. So the logic is like this, right? So for example, the oral stage. So for Freud, the idea is that there is a point, as we are growing up, where we discover that it is pleasurable to bring things into our mouth, either because we eat them, or because we suck on them, or because whatever, right? So Freud would say, The problem is that at some point we have to realize that there is a consequence, that there is more to the world than just enjoying what's on your mouth. So there needs to be you have to continue that development, right? You need to be aware that there is more to life than just satisfying your pleasures, your needs, than just being driven by your needs. And obviously that will happen naturally, right? At some point you realize, well, if I eat too much, I'm going to get sick. If I eat too much, I'm going to get fat. If I eat too much, I'm going to, I don't know, throw up, right? When that process doesn't happen, and there's a fixation in that pleasure, so for example, say, when people later in life pick up smoking, for example, it may be that that fixation never got resolved. And there is still this prime directive of satisfying my pleasurable needs, and the easy way to do that is to put something to my mouth. So now I am smoking all the time, because I never sort of internalized the idea that there are other ways to get pleasure that are not this. That I can sort of have delayed gratification, for example. So that's kind of the idea. So when there isn't like this sort of full development process in a way that is good enough, then there may be these internal conflicts later in life where we have these unconscious behaviors that we cannot explain why, and this causes conflict. Maybe I don't want to smoke because I understand I'm killing myself when I'm smoking. So I don't want to keep smoking, but I keep doing it. Why? Okay, let's talk about your unconscious. Let's talk about your childhood. This is why psychoanalysis concerns itself with childhood, because there may be something there. So those are these concepts. So these are these different concepts that help understand how our mind works, or mind specifically, not our brain, or mind. So that's what a construct is.
So, well, now I get that the idea has nothing really to do with reducing your symptoms,
Not really.
and whatever they are.
No.
Then how exactly is this made to work? I mean, as someone ignorant and new to the topic, I only see many elaborate and compound terms, and instinctively, I go on alert. So this could be some fake stuff. So, what techniques are applied, and what is really behind or being solved? What are we looking for here?
Okay, so you are very, very correct in the idea that the reduction of symptoms is not the goal. And now I can tell you, sort of hopefully connected to everything else, like why that is not the goal. And the reason is that there will always be a symptom. And that's kind of Freud's sort of underlying idea. That we all have a symptom of some sort. That nobody is this perfect enlightened being that does only what they want to do when they want to do because they want to do it. So Freud would say, we all have a symptom. And that's why for Freud, the basic state of humanity is neurosis. Because we all have things we want to do but cannot do. We all have concerns for the laws and for making sure we are not breaking the law and for making sure we are doing things quote unquote right. So for Freud, the idea of getting rid of the symptom doesn't make sense because that's impossible. So what Freud and psychoanalysis' goal is to move the symptom somewhere where it is not problematic, ideally, or rather, not problematic, or ideally, something that actually enriches your life and helps society. I have used this example in a different context before, for example. Somebody that may have anger issues, that gets angry really easy, that's their symptom. Maybe the solution is not to stop them from being angry. Maybe the solution is get them to be angry about climate change and go protest outside Parliament and try to get things changed, try to sort of do something for the good of humanity. You don't need to get rid of your anger. We can just do something else with your anger. We can just use it for something constructive. So that's kind of Freud's logic here. That symptoms, all symptoms can be equally problematic or non-problematic depending on the context. So the goal of trying to achieve a symptom-free life is nonsense. The goal is that's why the goal is to understand your symptoms so that you can organize them in a way that you are happy with, that you can continue to live your life with in peace, knowing that there will always be something that you are not happy about, because that's the human condition. So that's kind of the base of sort of the goal of psychoanalysis. And what it looks like in practice is, rather than having a specific techniques as you would have in CBT, where you would say, okay, what we're going to do in this case is apply a reward system, whatever, you have what's called an intervention, or an interpretation. An interpretation is when you offer the client an understanding of what's going on, an understanding of what could be an explanation for their symptoms, an explanation for the what we have been talking about as we've been watching analysis for a while. So, for example, I already gave you an example there as well. Somebody that's saying, oh, you know what, I hate this person so much because, I don't even know why. Whenever I see them, my day is ruined. And this is a problem because they are my coworkers, so I have to see them every day. So, I hate my job. I'm about to quit my job, but that doesn't make sense because this is a great job. This person. An intervention that obviously this wouldn't be like perfect, or it would be like months down the line. An intervention there could be what I said earlier. Like, what doesn't bother you about this person? Oh, I don't know. Well, from what you have told me, it's that this person is very assertive. They like telling people what to do. And I have got you, you've told me this is something you don't like about yourself. Does that make sense to you? Shit, you are right. That's why. Because I hate when I do that, and that fucker does it all the time. Intervention, right? Interpretation. So that's kind of what doing in psychoanalysis looks like. You are doing interpretation. You are trying to connect the dots that the client has put on the table. So that's why I like that metaphor. Well, let's put everything on the table and then we can see how we build something. Because what you're trying to do is give the client a new idea. Help them think of things they have not done before. Remember what I said before. If they could say the reason I smoke cigarettes is because they remind me of my great grandfather who was the only person in my life who showed me any love, they wouldn't be in the room talking to you. We have to get to them being able to say that. And then they can decide, you know what, I actually like smoking because it reminds me of my great grandfather who was the only person who showed me love. So I'm not going to stop smoking. Maybe they will say, you know what, maybe my great grandfather would not have liked me to die from lung cancer, so I'm actually going to stop smoking. But notice how that decision is now meaningful, personal, sort of a choice, a true deciding to smoke or not to smoke. Versus me saying, okay, let's buy one less pack of cigarettes next week, and the week after that we will buy only 10 cigarettes, and the week after that we will buy only 5 cigarettes. For some people that works. For some people that doesn't work. So that's kind of the idea. So that's what it looks like. Like I said, it looks like interpretation. They happen very rarely, and that's kind of the point. Because it's very difficult to get to a good interpretation. So they happen rarely. That's why in psychoanalysis, 80-90% of the talking is done by the client. Because it's very delicate to do an interpretation. Because you are literally reorganizing the person's life. So you have to be very careful.
Okay, so like rebuilding with the structures you have, more or less, like getting the pieces of the Legos and reshaping the idea.
Exactly. Another example, if you realize that the reason why you are addicted to prostitutes is because that's the only way you can feel love. Okay, maybe rather than us trying to get you to stop going to prostitutes, let's figure out other ways for you to feel love. And hopefully, maybe that will stop you going to prostitutes. Right, so notice how it doesn't even matter what the goal is. Like, the point is changing things in a way that you can be at peace or can be happy. So maybe the real thing is not what you came into the office with, but something else that we discover along the way, and that would be perfectly fine. We just switch. That's another idea.
Okay, so I imagine that over the course of a bit more than a century, something must have changed in this field. And I have seen some, rather grand sounding titles related to it, such as ego psychology or relational psychoanalysis. I don't know if it's really related or connected somehow, but is Freud systems still used, or it has already been discontinued? I mean, are you using other kind of stuff, or is the same stuff from over a century ago?
So I think this follows what I said earlier, that it would be dishonest to say that, Freud's ideas don't play a role anymore in our modern practice of psychology, I would say, which is psychoanalysis. However, it would also be sort of naive to think that we still use psychoanalysis the same way Freud did 120 years ago. So no, definitely, I say from the beginning, one of the things that characterized psychoanalysis was that people just didn't agree with Freud's ideas. So, like, Freud's history is full of all the disciples that he lost along the way because they disagreed with one or more of his theories. So definitely from the beginning, once psychoanalysis sort of begins to form as a discipline, there are a lot of other voices that are also sort of doing the research, also talking to the people, also sort of proposing their own theories. But the same way psychology sort of branches out, psychoanalysis also branches out after Freud sort of begins to, or creates the field. To the point that nowadays you have like dozens of schools of psychoanalysis, the same way you have dozens of schools of psychology. And what differentiates them is, one, the concepts that they use. So, for example, transference and concept transference will be a psychoanalytic concept in any branch of psychoanalysis. They come from Freud. But narcissistic transference, for example, is a concept that only exists in modern psychoanalysis. That's what I did my master's in. And it wouldn't really make sense or apply or be used in a different branch of psychoanalysis. I don't know if that makes sense. But there is this, that's what you said earlier, like, it has this sectarian, like, sort of nature to it. I almost feel like different sects of psychoanalysis, where they have slightly different dogmas, compared to the other schools of psychoanalysis. But they share a core of ideas. That core of ideas are usually Freud and his earliest sort of students or his earliest collaborators. And then it sort of radiates out into different schools of psychoanalysis. So you can think of it like a circle, where at the center you have Freud, and that's kind of why all of these are psychoanalysis, because they build on Freud's original ideas. But then they radiate outwards, and the more they radiate outwards, the less they have in common with one another. I'd say the most practical branch of psychoanalysis is the closest one to psychology, which I would say is psychodynamic psychotherapy, which is psychotherapy, the way psychology does it, but informed or organized by the concepts that Freud discovered, this psychodynamic, of the unconscious, the ego and the id, sort of playing with each other. So there's this dynamism inside the mind. So that's why it's called psychodynamic theory, because it takes those ideas to sort of provide therapy. But that's what psychoanalysis is. Psychoanalysis is psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is, again, the difference with the goal. Psychodynamic psychotherapy, we're still talking about your symptoms. Okay, so we're trying to get you to stop smoking. We will talk about your understanding of why you smoke and where this comes from and all that. But we will also okay, next week let's do only 1 pack instead of 2 packs a week. So they go hand in hand. But why? Because we are trying to understand why you're smoking. So when you want to buy another pack, see what comes to your mind. And we can talk about that in session. Okay, that is how we build on one thing or the other. They are very compatible in that sense. I think there are definitely people in both camps who would say, no, impossible, psychoanalysis, psychology. I think that's bullshit. I think that's like playing to your team. I think the reality is that they are very compatible. You can very much bring together different techniques, different ways of working, depending on the person you are working with. For some people, having a clear goal works better. For some people, talking about whatever comes to their head is very easy, and that is a very effective way of moving forward. So yeah. Sorry. So yes, we still use Freud as a defender, but now there are a lot of different codes of psychoanalysis that are, I would say, like more modern, that now understand psychoanalysis in the context of 2026 psychology, 2026 neurology, 2026 psychiatry. So they are now interconnected. So now you have things like neuropsychoanalysis, which is a branch of neurology that tries to map the concepts of psychoanalysis to the neural structures in your brain. So there is now this connection. But these structures are still the unconscious that Freud described 100 years ago. So that is how there is this connection between the past and the present. So nobody, like I said before, does orthodox Freudian psychoanalysis anymore, I would hope. But at the same time, everybody's still using the concepts that Freud put together and described and sort of worked on 100 years ago. If that makes sense.
So I said earlier, it's like religion. Well, it's more actually like Christianism, right?
It's
So
not like Christianism.
original Christianism is no more there. There are different branches now, but you can say maybe Orthodox, Eastern Europe, Catholics are the closest ones to that branch, or maybe Roman Catholics are the ones, and then you got all the Christian branches out there. So, yeah, we're in there, same stuff, different,
very
different bearded guy.
Yeah, literally, very good way of thinking about it. Literally like that. There are constantly, and they're still happening in the present, like there are constantly these schisms in psychoanalysis, and new schools of psychoanalysis appear because they disagree about specifically how to work with psychotic patients. So now there's a new branch of psychoanalysis.
Yeah. And well, this as last part of this section is in all this. Where is the evidence of this works? That this works somehow. And I mean, if everything happens in the mind, the mind is something real, then reality is nothing at all. Like in the joke, or but jokes aside, strong evidence, I mean, or moderate evidence, or weak evidence, or any kind of evidence, we're kind of skeptic, find solid ground actually to land on when talking about psychoanalysis or psychology in general, because as you said at the beginning and many other times before, everything happens in the brain, but there's no way to find it out. So what are we using as evidence that something on this is actually working?
I said there are two kinds of evidence we have. On one hand, we have, like I said, when we read the more modern look at it, which is what I said earlier. We can do trials, we can do meta-analysis studies, we can do these observational sort of studies where we look at the outcome, where we look at people before and after receiving training. So through that, we can establish sort of the effectiveness of things like psychoanalysis, things like medication. Even if we don't exactly know the mechanisms they are using, we can prove they are working. And then on the other hand, you have sort of what's really at the core of psychoanalysis, which is really the case studies. And I think that's, again, kind of the big difference between psychology and psychoanalysis. Psychology will say, well, I can prove to you that this works statistically. Psychology will say the same, but psychology will say, but I don't care about it. What I care to show you is that I work for the experiential. I want you to look at the people that I'm working with. I want you to look firsthand what they are saying. I want you to understand firsthand how what I'm saying clicks with their mind. So I would say a big chunk of the study in psychoanalysis is looking at the cases, and this begins with Freud. A lot of his books are just his case studies. So if you read Angao's case, yes, he's talking about his ideas, but he's doing so while taking you through the case, while telling you about this person and what happened and what did he say, what did she say, why did he interpret it like that and not the other way. That dynamic is sort of maintained up until today. So up until today, the way psychoanalysis sort of presents its findings is with case studies. I come from you, okay, this is what I did, this was the person, this is what they showed, this is how I interpreted this is how they reacted, this is what we did, this is why I did it, this is the theory behind it. So you will have this very individual, one-on-one, this particular person, how I helped this particular person. That is the case study and that is the evidence. Again, that's a big difference with psychology. Psychoanalysis, this is the prime form of it. This is what psychoanalysis sort of puts forward when somebody says, well, how does it work? Even if we can show it objectively as well, that is more psychology who's doing that study. Psychoanalysis will say, what proves that my theory works is this. Look at how the person changed from when we started working to where we are now. Look at how the problem went away. Look at how we discovered that the problem wasn't smoking. It was the war that their parents escaped from 20 years ago. Sure. Like, that is kind of the idea. So I'd say the way sort of people hop on the psychoanalysis bandwagon is through reading the case studies, through reading sort of, I would say, reading in action, like seeing psychoanalysis in action and seeing if the logic of psychoanalysis checks out for them. I really think that is kind of the key. It is if psychoanalysis works and is real and everything I say is true, then reading a case, the logic should check out for you. The logic should make sense. You should be able to say, oh, yeah, okay, I understand why Freud said this in this particular situation. I understand why, I can't think of another way. Why Lacan is wrong. Nobody ever went Lacan. I understand why Freud decided that this case was done or that more sessions were necessary or whatever. Ideally comes from that first-hand experience, from that following that, like I said before, it's not like following a mystery novel, like following the clues. If psychoanalysis works, the clues should make sense, and the conclusion should make sense. So as you are reading a case study, the different interpretations should all be clues that make sense and match for the person. And at the end, the person should be able to say, yeah, you're right. Turns out, the reason I was doing this is this. And now I understand. Something has changed in me. That's how. So there's this sort of self-correcting or self-validating mechanism to it. Like your client is going to tell you at the end of the day if this makes sense for you.
I'll look at it in this same thinking process. There might be also people who simply does not connect with it, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, totally. I think that's valid to all branches of psychology. There are people for whom introspecting is either very challenging or just doesn't have any value. So you're wasting your time if you're introspecting for hours and hours or hours. The opposite may also be true. There may be people for whom doing something is really meaningful. It doesn't really change anything, it doesn't mean anything for them. What matters is the reasoning, the logic behind doing that. So absolutely. I think the reason why psychoanalysis is still around, along with all the other branches of psychology, is that different branches work for different people. For some people, abstract thinking is easier. For some people, concrete thinking is easier. For some people, it's easier to think of the present and like the days that are coming immediately. For other people, it's easier to think about the future and like what is the next year going to look like. So all of these things kind of determine what style of therapy works better for different people.
Very well. So let's get to the questions part, where internet tell us what you should answer now. So I got 5 questions as always, and this starts like this. Is psychoanalysis the same as therapy?
No. There is psychoanalytic therapy. There is psychodynamic psychotherapy. That is therapy. Psychoanalysis is psychoanalysis. So psychoanalysis has a different goal, like we said earlier. The goal is not to get rid of the symptom, it is to understand the symptom. Because that's what will make things get better on the long term. And psychoanalysis is completely focused on the client's individual experience of their symptoms. Psychotherapy focuses on the client's experience, but also on the collective knowledge of, for example, depression. Does this match depression? So I can use the idea of depression to help this person. Psychoanalysis doesn't do that. Psychoanalysis only cares about your experience, of your life, of your symptom in this particular situation. That's the other.
Okay. Easy enough. If it doesn't include the word therapy, it's not a therapy.
Exactly. That's actually, yes. If you don't have therapy, the game is got therapy.
Okay. Does it always focus on childhood?
No. I think that's a misconception. It definitely considers childhood, and definitely you will be hopefully talking about your childhood, but it is not the central topic, right? Like I think that's like I said, that's a misconception. It is again, it's a clue. It is a piece of the puzzle, so that's why it's important. That's what we talk about. But it is just a piece of the puzzle. What the rest of the puzzle is like, that depends on the person and what's going on. So the reason why it's very common is because it is almost always a piece of the puzzle. So almost always you will be asked about your family in there, not just psychoanalysis, in therapy as well. But again, it's just a piece. It's just part of the whole painting, and that's kind of what psychoanalysis really cares about, the whole experience.
Yeah, and I guess well, depending on how old you are, it might be a bigger or smaller piece of the puzzle at the end.
Yep, yeah.
Right? So, well, I mean, this could be misleading somehow, but is it scientifically supported?
It is not. And I think this is one of the sort of key elements about psychoanalysis. The reason it's not scientifically supported is that the tools of science cannot be applied to psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis cannot use them. Why? Because if I am giving you psychoanalysis, then the techniques, the interpretations I use with you are completely dependent on you, who you are, your life history, what we are talking about on that day. All of these very individual patterns. So I cannot take the exact same recipe of what I did with another person and do it and show that this recipe works. It doesn't. This is a problem since the beginning. Freud was a neurologist. And up until the day he died, he wants psychoanalysis to be a science. He starts psychoanalysis wanting it to be a science. He wants to use the tools of medicine, of psychiatry, of science to describe the process of the unconscious. And his writings are very much organized as scientific writings. He follows very methodical, precise description and process. However, by the end of his life, he is also completely aware that this is impossible. He also just says that the methods of science are not reconcilable to the methods of psychoanalysis. The closest thing you can do is what I said earlier. You can measure outcomes. You can use the tools of science to sort of show that it works. But inside the process, the tools of science are incompatible. They are in opposition to what psychoanalysis is. Science tries to, from deduction, from large ideas, apply them to all of it. Psychoanalysis does the opposite. It looks at the individual, and from many individuals, it tries to get ideas that can be generalized. So they are inductive versus deductive reasoning. They are in complete opposition. So no, it's not I mean, it is scientifically supported, yes, but it is not scientifically
proven.
No, the other way around. Because you can prove it. You can use statistics to prove that it works. But you can use science to describe how it's working, or why it's working, or its methods. So you can prove that psychoanalysis as a practice has good results. So you can use science to prove that it works. But psychoanalysis is not a science in itself. It does not use the scientific method to build knowledge. So that's the difference. Psychology, you can prove through science that it works, but it's also a science in itself. It uses the scientific method as part of its understanding and description of nature. Psychoanalysis doesn't. You can prove it works, but it doesn't use the scientific method. And the scientific method doesn't work inside this mechanism because it goes the other way. It's a different way of producing knowledge.
Okay. Does it take many, many years?
Oh no, definitely not years. Like that is definitely. I mean, it can take years, right? Like the way I lie to the audience, like it can take years, yes. But generally it does. Right? I think the number they used in university was between 9 to 12 sessions until it's easy for the client to notice a change. I say easy to notice because it's not that the other 9 sessions nothing happened. It's a little bit like growing grass or growing a plant or watching paint dry. There are changes, but they are small. So it takes a few collected changes for you to be able to notice, oh shit, yeah, I haven't been doing this in a while. Oh yeah, you're right. So between 9 and 12 sessions is the number that you use at university as a reference for how long it takes to see a change.
Okay. This is the last one, and I believe it's quite fitting with all the religion stuff we've been messing around with. So, do you need to believe in Freud for it to work?
um, no, definitely not. I would say there is an element of belief. I mean, I would argue also you have a belief, but I would say there is an element of neoconscious. Like that's kind of the how do you say the prerequisite belief for working in psychoanalysis is believing because we definitely cannot see it. So there is a belief there, believing that there is an unconscious. And that is definitely a belief. There are a lot of cognitive behavioral psychologists who say there is no unconscious, and if there is, it doesn't matter because all that matters is behavior. So that is definitely the sort of key differentiator there. There are some people who do believe in the conscious but would not call themselves analysts. I would argue if you are working with the conscious, you are doing psychoanalysis one way or another. Even if you are not labeling as such, working with the conscious is psychoanalysis. So you do not need to believe in Freud, but it does need to make sense to you. The idea that part of your behavior is directed by an unconscious part of you. If that idea doesn't make sense to you, if you hear that you think, oh, that's bullshit, then no, psychoanalysis is not for you one way or another. And it's valid. Maybe you're right.
With that, we have it for today. Thank you, Josh, for these clarifications. And we love to hear from you on the other side of the screen, like each and every week. We ask you to reply on us or write us whatever you like. No insults, please, if unless necessary. I mean, we're trying to learn something here. So be welcome to use our spaces to find out on whatever on the mind is on your mind.
Yeah, as always, if you have any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to know or you'd like to hear more about, you can leave it in the comments. We'll do our best to answer. And as always, thank you. Thank you very much for being here.
So if behavior is the surface of the mind, psychoanalysis is the drive, slow, deliberate, and sometimes the only way to see what's really moving underneath.
Yeah. I think that's the message of psychoanalysis. So thinking things more slowly, of looking deeper, of enjoying the question and not just the answer. I think that's the big message of being okay with asking questions that won't always immediately have an answer. I think that's kind of the key. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here.
And say that until next time. Peace out.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.